if you have your own device, you can follow along. If you don't, you'll be okay. We're not going to get into 25 things you can do to make your Word document accessible, because I'm a real big believer in editing and in overstuffing your brains at the end of a day. So what we're actually going to focus on is just a handful plus of techniques. And I teach this stuff from Word because almost everybody has Microsoft in front of them. Or if you use Google stuff, really, really similar. So is there anybody that doesn't have Microsoft Office in front of them at work? Okay. How many of you are on Office 2010? If you know. Okay. How many of you are going, I don't really know what version I'm on? That's a really, really good question, Rob. If you are, it's okay either way. One thing I'll say, and I'm not unique in saying this, if you want to make an accessible PDF out of Office, strongly encourage, if it is financially possible, strongly encourage your IT to get you to a more current version than 2010 especially. There's some wonkiness in Office 2010. If you create a PDF out of Word, it kind of breaks some stuff. And I'm just going to leave it there. Yes?
So at DHS, we have been in the process of upgrading to, and I'm using air quotes, Windows 10.
Okay.
Is that the same?
Different deal.
Okay.
Different deal. Very good question. So you have your operating system in Windows and that version, and that's just required to make your computer come up. Then you'll have Office that has Word and PowerPoint and what else? Excel, Access potentially. God help you if you have to use Access. Outlook. God help all of us because we have to use Outlook, right? And know what I mean, eh? Anybody getting, never mind. So, so Office has all the productivity stuff that's installed. So there's be two different versions you're looking at. Like I said, with Office 2010, I mean, again, it's 2018. So you're on software that's 8+ years old. And I know you may be totally powerless to do anything about it. You can encourage maybe just based on the accessibility support in the later versions. I'm going to demonstrate from 2013, I believe, is what I have on my machine. Anybody on 2016 or newer that you know of? 2016 or 365? How many are on 365? So Office 365, latest, greatest, fanciest. There's the stuff you can use in the cloud, as I point to the sky. And then there's the installed stuff as well. The installed stuff literally changes every week. And one of the great things that Microsoft's accessibility team and Office team is doing is they're building in tools to make it easier to create accessible Office documents almost every week. That's awesome, but it makes it really hard to teach and keep up with. So, yes, sir. So what I'm going to do is show you this stuff in 2013. It's going to be very much the same in 2016. In Office 365, I'm going to send you a link to Microsoft's accessibility documentation, which sounds really intimidating, but it's not like the 5,000-page books that they used to hand out. It's really easy to search. It's easy to tell it what version you have, including Mac versions, for those of you who are using Office for Mac, and then get into how do I do this stuff. It's in one of the it's in the resource slide at the end of the slide deck. That's your portal to Microsoft's information, which does stay super, super current. So I highly suggest that you keep that link because that's going to be the place where you can go if you're on a version other than what I'm showing. There's my disclaimer for the afternoon. Somebody asked if I was a lawyer. My other disclaimer should have been, no, I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay at a holiday. Never mind. It's not an express, so it doesn't count. It doesn't make us any smarter just by sleeping here. Again, any questions you thought of during the break? No? Okay. Again, ask questions as we go. I'm going to, after this slide, really move away from the slides and hop into Word and show you some stuff and talk through it. But I want to talk first about a little bit of the application of accessibility. And you're going to hear me use a couple of terms. So you have what you can see on the screen, right? Like this PowerPoint slide looks pretty simple. You know, it's got some text on it. It's got some bullets and lists stuff. It's a pretty simple slide. There's what you can see with a PowerPoint slide or a Word document or a PDF. And then there's what makes it look that way. That's all behind the screen. And accessibility really lives in both of those places. It lives in the presentation that's visible and in the structure that's behind the screen. So as an example, if you're typing out a document, it's a 5-page document, more than likely you're not just typing out a sea of text. Maybe you are, but I'd suggest maybe you kind of chunk that text into groups and put some headings in between the different sections to make it a little bit easier to move through or navigate if someone comes back to it. The structural piece is what defines the logic. It's what defines the way things look, but there's also a lot of really important information in the structure. So think about this room. There's a bunch of stuff we can't see behind the walls, and I don't mean like bugs and stuff. I don't want to allege anything like that. I made like 5 people uncomfortable unnecessarily. I do apologize. I get punchy too. The walls, we can't see however they frame this room in. We don't know if it's wood or steel or whatever. We can't see the electric infrastructure, the fire suppression stuff. You know, all that stuff is back behind the walls. But it's still really, really important. You know, framing a door out defines the width of the door, which is important under the ADA, right? So in a similar kind of way, the structure of a digital document defines its accessibility as well as how it looks. I'm going to focus a lot on word styles as we talk about Word. But if you read a little bit about accessibility, you're going to start reading about HTML or PDF tags, these other places where accessibility lives in these different formats. I'm going to leave that there. So a few things, and I'll demonstrate each one of these. I just want to give you a quick preview. And this is also a set of Googleable terms or Bingable, whatever search engine you use. It doesn't really matter to me. But these are the things you can look for, and just put the word accessibility after them, and you'll be able to find more information. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is those section and subsection headings. We're going to take a look at things as simple as lists, like this has a 4-item bulleted list up on the slide. We're going to take a look at making sure that those are accessible. We're going to talk a little bit about how to work with link text so that people know what's going to happen when they follow a link before they actually get to the page. We're going to spend some time discussing what to do with those visual elements that have meaning and how we make sure that somebody using a screen reader can actually get to that meaning. We'll talk a little bit about data tables. Again, it can be a whole other workshop, but I'll at least talk a bit about using data tables and using tables to hold stuff where you want on the screen, which is something that you may still do, and that's okay. It's not ideal, but it'll work. Then a couple of the visible pieces and color contrasts and how we use color to convey meaning. And I'm going to mention, more than likely for the sake of time, I won't do much more than mention, captions for video and transcripts for audio stuff. If you have any multimedia in your world at all, or if you record training videos or anything like that, then the transcription piece and the captioning piece is a big part of the conversation as well. So those are the points that we're going to hit on. 7 of those I'll just show you in Word and talk through. Fair enough? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move into Word. Hey, there's today's agenda. I'm going to start out with a magic trick. You chuckle, but wait. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have a blank document and you need some text, other than typing a whole bunch of gobbledygook, you can hit Enter key, R-A-N-D, stands for RAND, then open parentheses, and you type 2 numbers separated by a comma. What this is going to do is it's going to create number 1, number of paragraphs, and number 2, sentences in each paragraph, and just splat that out there for you. I never remember which is which. I never remember which number is the paragraphs, which number is the sentences, and every time somebody Googles it and says, Rob, you idiot, it's this, and the next time I do this, I forget again. I said, Rob, you idiot, and my phone just said, how can I help? You just can't make it up. It really did. Here are the top search results. Oh, Google. So equal RAND, open parentheses. I'm going to do 3, 3. Close the parentheses, hit enter, ba-boom, content. There's my magic trick. Thank you very much. I will not be here after today. I won't be here all week. What this actually does is it just goes to the Microsoft support documentation and picks random stuff and throws it out there. So it's, if you wanted to search for a particular thing in Microsoft support, you'd probably read across this eventually. But for my purposes, it gives me some text to mess with. So I want to talk first about headings. I want to talk first about screen resolution. Give me a moment. We kind of did a last-minute switch, totally my fault. Let me mess about with my resolution here a bit. I can audio describe everything, and I will, but it could be helpful to be able to see it a little bit better as well. Anybody know a magic trick? Anybody want me to make their phone turn on and help me be less of an idiot? My wife must have put that on there. And let me know in the back if changing my resolution is messing anything up on the capture too. Okay, that is better. That maybe is as well as I can do. So again, you're typing a document out as opposed to just typing out a sea of text, paragraph after paragraph. They're probably logical chunks of content. And when you have those, you put a heading over them, right? I'm super, super creative, as you're going to find out in the rest of our time together. When I just ask Google for everything, and it's eavesdropping, so it gives me better ideas than I have. I just say things like, first section. So the long oral tradition that's out there about how to make this into a heading is what? No, that's a short tradition. You're right. It's we select it and we make it bigger. Right? Anybody sound familiar? I'm going to make the font larger. Oh, thank you. Bolded. Anything else? Ooh. Y'all are fancy up in Wisconsin. So here's the problem with that. This is just a change in the presentation. These are all only visible changes. Why that's important is if someone happens to use a screen reader or a braille display, they have it read through this, it's just going to read first section. But what's important about that text? It's a heading. It's fundamentally different than the content around it. If you're doing this, this is a safe space. I don't blame anybody because, again, no one teaches this. You could have gone to word training and more than likely never learned that this was important for accessibility. But it really, really is. So the way around it, as you said in the back, styles. These heading styles, they're in the upper right center of the screen. There are keyboard shortcuts for all of this stuff, and you can also do a lot to customize where this control is. If you want to get into that, I can help after the session. But you want to get into the styles group and apply whatever number of heading logically makes sense. I've got heading 1, heading 2. If I use heading 2, it's going to pop up heading 3 automatically. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you're not just incrementing your headings. In other words, you're not saying first heading is heading 1, then the second one is heading 2, third one is heading 3. You're defining the relationship of these different sections. So if you have a main section with 5 subsections, you'll have a heading 1 and 5 heading 2s. Does that make sense? And the way to do it is just to change it to a heading 1. I'm going to select this content again, and I'm going to choose heading 1. And it changes it visibly. It's not what we wanted, but we're going to change that here in just a minute. But what it's done in addition to the visible change is it said back behind the screen, this is a heading 1. Screen reader hits it, it's going to announce heading level 1, and then it's going to hit the content. So someone using a reader or a braille display is going to know this is a heading. But wait, there's more. If you're in a later version of Office, well, let me go through and add a couple of other headings. I'm going to add 2 subsection headings. what did I call that one? Heading, yeah, first section, subsection. Oh yeah, it keeps going. I'm going to make that a heading 2, and I'm going to come in and put another subsection. I'm also going to make that a heading 2. So again, screen reader hits that, announces heading level 2, and then it announces the content that's the heading. For those of you who use Office quite a bit, there are a lot of other advantages. Anybody know another advantage? Yes?
It'll automatically generate a table of contents.
Hallelujah, praise be, it will. I did an accessibility assessment on a 250-ish page PDF a couple of months ago. Somebody had gone in and manually created the table of contents. They had manually created the table of contents. They had manually created, yeah. So what does that mean if you change a section and you bounce onto a new page? You get to go back and manually update everything from that page forward. So you can create a table of contents that's based on the headings, and we'll see if I can remember, because usually I can't. This is the part where I don't show you how to do that. So,
It's under review.
thank you.
It's not on.
I should have slept at the Holiday Inn Express.
Okay, I was wrong.
Nah, that's all right.
It's on the far left side. Whatever it is.
View gives you another thing that's actually really, really helpful. So in the View tab, and I can show you this, and this is a new feature. If you're on Office 2010, I don't think you can do this. I think this is 2013 and newer. But there's something called the navigation pane. And that's in the View tab, and there is a little checkbox in this show group labeled navigation pane. When I click on that checkbox, it shows me the headings. It defaults to showing me the headings over here to the left. If you've ever navigated a PDF with bookmarks before, this is basically that. So by heading and subheading, I can really easily click on this and go right to the content in the page. Wherever it is. 200-page document, I can snap right to it. Another question or comment?
References is the table of contents.
Yeah, that's good.
Moving slow.
I think the table of contents is in references. I knew it was in R1. All
No,
the way to
yeah,
the left.
References tab, table of contents. So then this is 2013, References tab, table of contents. I can click on this button at the far left, says table of contents, and I see these different formatting options for an automatic table of contents. This is looking at the heading structure. This is looking at those heading styles I applied. So if I say automatic table 1, it's going to give me my table of contents. I put it in the middle of the document. And it's going to do this automatically for me. And the best part of it is, if I add additional content and additional headings, to update it, I come in here and I right-click on the table, and there is a selection there that says Update Field, and it'll update it for me. It also makes, from a visible perspective, if you use the heading styles, it makes the visible styling consistent through your entire document. One of the risks that you run if you manually format every heading and subheading is that you're not going to quite match the font size. You may forget an underline. You can forget something. So this makes sure that they are all visibly consistent throughout the entire document. Easy enough? That's something that a lot of people, this actually is taught a little bit more. I disparage people who teach, not people, I disparage a lot of the Office training that's out there. This is starting to find its way in because it just makes it so much more productive. You know, it's less using Word as a typewriter and more using it as a word processor. And what Microsoft did is they said, well, hey, while we're making this piece of software more user-friendly and making it more powerful, let's build some accessibility into these features. So now let's say, for example, for our first level heading, we want that underline. Because when I change to heading 1, I don't have an underline. I can come into the heading styles, and I'm going to do a right-click, which is also Shift F10 from the keyboard if you want a keyboard shortcut, if those come in handy. Anytime I say right-click, you can also think Shift F10. It'll open up this little context menu. So I did my right-click on the Heading 1 Style option up in the Styles pane. And what I'm going to do is modify it. There's an option in this drop-down that says Modify. When I open this, it gives me a little pop-up that looks kind of familiar. It certainly has some familiar styling choices. For example, the properties stuff I'm going to leave out. There's a properties section with the name of this style. I'm not going to worry about that. The middle section says formatting, and I've got my font choice, my font size. I've got formatting, bold, italics, and underline. I can change my font color. I can change the justification, left, right. I can add line spacing or take it away. I have a lot of options here. So the main thing I want to do with this is I actually want to make that first level heading a little bit bigger. So my font size is currently set to 16. I've got a drop-down arrow that I'm going to select. I'm going to bump it up to a 22-point font. And I'm going to select the underline. It previews it visibly in this dialog box so that you get a better idea of what it's actually going to look like. And now I'm going to select the OK button, and my first level heading automatically looks the way I want it to. The nice thing about that is, let's say that I have a second section. If I come in and begin a second section with section, no, what did I call that one? With second section. This is another main section, so I'm going to make this a first level heading. When I select heading 1, it looks just like the other one that's on there. This also means that if you want to change all the headings in a document, I'm going to go into my heading 1. Let's say that somebody tells me you have to ditch the underline. I'm going to right-click and choose Modify on that heading 1 style up at the top again. I'm going to unselect the underline. I'm going to hit OK. And anything that was a first level heading loses the underline. So you can make formatting changes in bulk across an entire document just like that, instead of having to go through and update visibly one at a time. Easy enough? I think for me, this is one of the places where I've made more accessible content and I've bought a lot of time. It takes a lot less time to go in and edit and to worry about things like a table of contents. The navigation pane is extremely helpful. And by the way, when you save this as a PDF, these things are going to be headings in the PDF as well. So the next thing is a list. Lists take, generally speaking, two different formats, right? One is bulleted or unordered list, and the other is numbered or numbered list. And in later versions, this is one of the differences that I actually just kind of stumbled upon. If you're in Office 2010, for those of you who are, if you start to type a list out manually, it'll just let you keep doing it, I think. And what I mean by that is, let's say I have an unordered list, so I'm just going to have bullets with a few list items. I'm going to start manually formatting by hitting the Tab key, and I'm going to select the asterisk, and I'm going to hit spacebar, and it automatically in Office 2013 converts that to a bullet, and it takes over formatting the list for me, which is really what I want. If you're in Office 2010, and if you just want to start this using the button in newer versions, if you are in the Home tab and you go up to this paragraph group a little bit left of center at the top, you have buttons for unordered lists, bullets, and a numbered list, numbering. And those are the controls to look for. Those are the controls to look for in, as far as I know, every version of Office. I don't think they've really shifted them around a whole lot since 2010. So I'm going to put a little bit of gobbledygook in here. I'm going to make my little trick, rand 1, because that's shorter. Oh, it didn't do it. My trick doesn't work in a list. I'm firing my assistant. The nice thing about this is that visibly, one of the things that Word handles for you, and it's the same if you type really in basically any editor. Do any of you update web pages directly or anything like that? Show of hands. Hopefully your editor does the same stuff, has very similar controls that you can use. Use them for the same reasons. You know, use the styles that are built in, use the list formatting tools. One of the things that you get with this is you get free indentation with the list. So all of my list items are indented to the same level. And if I have a sub item, I can just hit tab and it's going to indent and change the bullet automatically. So again, as a content author, I get more out of it. For somebody, again, visibly reading through it, you've got the clean indent at the left side, and it's going to keep that consistent So it's going to be easier to distinguish list items from one another. From an accessibility perspective behind the screen, when a screen reader hits a list that's properly structured, it immediately announces list with however many items are in the list. So it lets somebody know this is very different content. Because a list may not even have complete sentences. Right? When I type a list up in the middle of a document, it's kind of the excuse to not worry so much about sentence structure. They're going to be short points. Well, it's going to be really confusing if the screen reader just starts reading sentence fragments in the midst of other paragraph content. So if you have list structure applied, it announces right off the bat, hey, this is a list. Here's how many items. And then when it gets to the end of the list, it says end of list or some variation on that. So a whole lot of accessibility just by using these tools. And again, for those of you who deal directly with the web, your editing system should have these same tools there. If it doesn't, then it might be, well, it's a whole other conversation. But it might be worth having. Easy enough? Stuff you can do now? My goal with these is always to send people away with a handful of things that literally, get back to your office tomorrow, you can start using these techniques. And a lot of the techniques are similar in PowerPoint. How many of you all do training with PowerPoint? Or do anybody use something other than PowerPoint for slides? What do you use, just out of curiosity?
Sometimes I use a web-based format.
Web-based. So one like Prezi or somebody like that? Or Google Slides, okay. The controls in Google Slides should be really, really similar. Unless Prezi's dramatically changed, they don't have really good accessibility support. So I can't recommend, and I can't recommend really anybody other than them in the back as well. I like any question or comment that begins with a chuckle.
I just was curious as whether a lot of these features, if you know, they're in OpenOffice.
I don't know.
Okay. Because I have used OpenOffice for both word processing and for slides as well. It seems to transition okay, but I don't know if all the features are the same.
I don't know. I haven't used OpenOffice in years, so I don't even want to hazard a guess. My suggestion, if you want a quick answer, and you can do this, you're all the way in the back, I would never know. You could search OpenOffice accessibility and see if they have any documentation about support in the tool, because I just don't know. Alrighty. I want to talk a little bit about links. So accessibility standards say a lot, actually, about links. When you type links in content like a Word document, one of the main things is that link text, so the text that people actually click on or tap on or hit enter to follow, that needs to make some sense. That needs to be somewhat descriptive. The standards say that it needs to make sense in context with everything around it. But I always advise that people go a little bit further. And for example, avoid, if you form, or if you create a newsletter, say, in Word, try to avoid linking people to longer articles with click here over and over again, or read more over and over again. If you've used a screen reader, then you may know that they can list all of the links on a page in one list. There's a keyboard shortcut that'll say, hey, give me all the links. Well, if you have 5 links that read click here, then someone's going to hear click here 5 times. So it's a really good idea to add a little bit more description to your links. I also understand that we may not have, or you may not have, all of the control over that formatting. There might be someone above you who says, no, 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 we can't do any more than that. The idea is at a minimum, the link text itself, the clicky part, makes some kind of sense. In other words, it's not www.diy.self/da-la-la-la-la-la-la, right? Because that's not very useful for most folks. And even if web designers do a really good job of assigning page addresses, a description is still really, really helpful. In Word, it's relatively straightforward to add that. And I'm going to type out something that's probably in my link history. I'm going to type out Oklahoma Able Tech. And I'm going to select that text because I want to make this an active link in the document. I'm going to right click, or I actually have gotten in the habit of doing shift, oh gosh, turn on your function, Shift F10, because I'm in the habit of having a second keyboard as an explanation. And if I do Shift F10, then I get that little pop-up, and I never have to put my hands on a mouse. I'm going to move down to Hyperlink, or just hit the H key, and it gives me this little window. I will tell you the important things here. Number one, at the very top, the label on a form field says text to display. Well, I selected it. It says Oklahoma Able Tech. That's the visible text for the link. Down at the bottom, there is a field for the address. See if this is a drop down, because I have a bunch of them in here. I will see if Able Tech is one of them. Nobody can read it, so it doesn't really matter what I choose. And I click on OK, and what I've done is I've tucked that website address back behind the link text. So there's a description there that tells somebody, link to Oklahoma Able Tech. When a screen reader hits a link, it'll announce that it's a link. It'll actually announce if it's a visited link or not. So if it's a link that somebody has gone to before on their computer, the reader will say, visited link. And then it'll read the text. But there's a unique piece when you talk about a Word document or a PDF or PowerPoint slides. You all have printouts in front of you, right? So if all I do is type in the link text and make it into a link, if someone's looking at that from a printout, they're not going to know what the website address is. If they don't have the digital copy, they're not going to know the address. So what I suggest is to just make a note in parentheses, or if you have an appendix in a document, make a note somewhere that actually has the website address typed out. That's not an accessibility thing. That's just accounting a little bit for how documents like this are actually used. Sometimes they're consumed on a computer or a device. Sometimes they're actually printed out. So in this case, I'm just going to type www.okabletech.org, and that's going to be the way that I would send this out. Yes, question?
So could you take that link, since you said make a comment, could you go and review if you had track changes and do it as a comment?
That's not going to follow it into a PDF, and somebody would have to know to look for the comment. So I'm glad you asked that, because I did use a very specific term there in Office. And if you're in the review phase, if you all haven't used the review tab in Word, you can add comments that are sidebar comments. And if they go out to a PDF, they probably go as annotations. In this case, that's not what I would suggest, because those also won't print in a regular format. So that's a really good question. Thank you. Yes, Lisa.
So, Rob, we recently ran into a problem. We were working on the state AT plan, talking about the review tab. We were trying to do track changes to make it easier for people to follow where the council was taking the plan and modifying goals. But then when we converted it to a PDF, even though we tried really hard to make it accessible, the review changes, and we are on 10 at the state. They're in the process of upgrading us,
Okay.
so in the next few months we should be, came out as like googly gunk for him. So like whenever we had a strike through and then added text, it was putting like percentages and numbers and weird things behind it. Have you heard of that? And is there a way we can avoid that in the future? Even though we were kind of designing things the way you're saying, we still ran into that.
I don't know the answer quickly enough to be able to do it now. Let's talk afterwards and see. Sure. And we might actually try it in 2013 and see if it still does that.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if that'll...
Yeah, because that could be an issue that once you're on a newer version of Office, magically goes away. Well, not magically. Microsoft works really hard to make that stuff go away, but that could be something that goes away magically for y'all.
Okay.
Other questions, comments, concerns? How many of you all deal with data that goes into a table? Yeah. We all do reports, right? I'm going to go through this with what Word can do. Let me ask you all this. How many of you all have, say, a single data table that actually has about 3 tables worth of data crammed into it? In other words, you have kind of your regular table headers up at the top. Maybe you have some down the left-hand side. And then maybe you sneak some in the data as well. Yeah, I know. Don't do that if you can avoid it. How many of you can't avoid it? It's like a deliverable. I worked with, off and on, some researchers, and the research journals they published to basically told them, don't separate these out into multiple tables. Because my advice is always, if you have 3 tables, don't combine them into one. It makes it really difficult for anybody to use, and it makes it really difficult to make that accessible. If you're in Word, you can't do it. You have to do it in Acrobat Pro. And then the support on the AT side is a little bit spotty. So if there's any way at all that you can actually split those out into multiple tables, that's my first piece of advice. Keep your tables relatively straightforward. So I'll give you an idea of why. I'm going to insert a table here. Just go to the Insert tab, select Table. I'm going to grab a 4x4 table. And I apparently did 3x4. My top row is going to be just a single row with an individual column header for each column. This is going to be the most simple table structure that you can imagine. And that's because really that's all Word can support right now. So here's going to be column 1. Again, I'm incredibly creative. Anybody want to guess what the next one's going to be? Ooh, I like it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go odd numbers. Yeah, thank you. This is making me really uncomfortable that I've broken my pattern. The rest of the data I'm not going to worry about too much. The only thing that you can do currently in Word is come out here and select this single row. And you can select, actually, my pointer is out in the left margins, and that will select the entire row. And if you're also, again, looking for a pattern, it's a right-click or a Shift F10 to open up our familiar little context menu. There's an option here that says Table Properties. You have to go like 4 layers deep to make this work. I'm going to select Table Properties. I have a nice little Table Properties pop-up now. And I have a tab in here labeled Row. And that's what I want to do. What I want to do is say this row has table headers in it. That's all I'm trying to do. Well, there's a little checkbox here that says Repeat as header row at the top of each page. What that does, or what that did originally, is all it says. If you had a table that went across multiple pages, when you check this box, it would make sure that that header row appeared at the top of the next page so people didn't get disoriented or have to flip back and forth. Now what it does is it adds accessibility to the structure. So I click that little box and I hit OK. Visibly, nothing changes. But behind the screen, say, again, if someone using a screen reader or braille display comes in, when they start to navigate through the table, it'll announce that column 1 is a table header. And more importantly, especially if this is a long table, it's going to remind folks as they move through the data cells which header applies to which data, so people won't get lost as they navigate through. Does that make sense? Conceptually, practically? In Office, that's it. That's all you got. So if you have a table even that has a column of row headers, unless 2060 or unless 365 has changed, it won't support making sure that people know that those are headers for each one of the rows. So if you have a more complex table and you need to make it accessible, which you probably do, you're probably looking at publishing it in a different format. I hate to be the bearer of news. I won't call it bad, but potentially unpopular. That if you have more complex tables, you really do need a more sophisticated tool to try to make it accessible. Again, though, if you can start to take some of those tables that are all jammed into a single table, split those out into individual tables, then Word can do just that much more, right? Let's switch gears still with tables. How many of you all use tables to create columns in a Word document? Show of hands. It's okay, not anymore. From strictly the accessibility perspective, I'm not going to tell you not to use tables just to hold stuff in place. We call these layout tables because they help you lay different chunks of content out and hold it there. Strictly from the accessibility perspective, there's not a standard that says don't do that. Practically, it's another matter, and I would look for other ways of formatting content in Office. For example, the column formatting in later versions of Word is really, really straightforward. At least it's much more straightforward than in 2007, even 2010. The key thing to think about if you do use tables to lay content out is that the reading order that AT moves through a table is something you cannot change. So as an example, I'm just going to look at a couple of these table cells. Let's do this instead. So in the lower left cell, I've typed what. In the very middle cell, I've typed goes. And in the upper right, I've typed up. Visibly, if I ditch the borders, this looks like someone just typed out what goes up, going from the lower left to the upper right. I admit there are that may not work. It may be difficult to read as it is. But if you account for the way a screen reader moves through this, screen readers always read left to right, top to bottom. So how is a screen reader going to read those three words? Up goes what? It's going to completely reverse the reading order. So if you do still use tables to hold content in place, keep this in mind, because you'll end up really working against yourself and potentially literally reversing your thought to someone who's going through it with a screen reader. Questions, comments, concerns?